And we are live. Welcome to One Stream Live. Welcome to Connections Unplugged. My name is Krisa Skodra, and in this brand new video podcast, which has been a concept in my mind for a long time now, I have the chance to bring my LinkedIn connections to life. People that I met throughout my career, throughout my life, I bring them to the forefront in unscripted discussions for you to get to know them, to get their insights, to see who they are as professionals and as people, humans. This show is powered by One Stream Live, One Stream made from Finland with love, a great platform that enables you to multi-stream your content to a variety of social media platforms. And this is what we're doing now. We're live on LinkedIn, Facebook, YouTube, you name it. Today's special guest that is joining me from Sweden, a good neighbor, is Michael Johansson. Hi, Michael.
Hi.
Despite the odds, we made this live stream happen. So thank you for joining me. May I read what you write in your LinkedIn profile? I think you have a very interesting presence there on LinkedIn. First of all, your title there is Optimist at ChangePilots. And you say there that my role is that of a pilot to guide captains and their ships through unfamiliar territories into safe waters. For more than 25 years, you have been guiding CEOs, management teams, boards, NGOs, and business owners through transformative times. Tell us a little bit, first of all, about you as a person. Have you always been an optimist? Does it come from your childhood? Who is Michael and why you're an optimist?
I think I put the title Optimist sort of like 10 years ago or something like that to my title, because I think that reflected my approach both in life as a person, but also in my role as a guide for companies and their leadership. And I think that reflects sort of like my life philosophy. I'm really optimistic, not naive, which many people misinterpret that title as, but optimistic that if I do the work myself, things will be better. And that's the key sort of like is that I have the confidence to say, if I do this, things will get better for me and for society as a whole. And that's my approach to leadership as well. If I can guide leaders into having a courage to believe in themselves and to make the plan and do the shit that needs to be done, then things will get better. So that's really something that comes from that. Does that come from my childhood? Maybe. Maybe it does. But it's sort of like it's an emotion that I put into words sort of like 10 years ago, because I think that really made sense to me, and many people I talk with, they appreciate that approach. And that's also what's my professional reputation comes from that optimistic view and that pragmatic view of I need to do something by myself for things to change, for things to get better. It won't be better by itself.
You talk about transformation, and do you remember where we met for the first time? Let's tell to our viewers how this LinkedIn connection and personal connection started. Do you recall?
Yeah, in Helsinki, sort of like a couple of months ago or something like that. I was there to give a speech at a retail conference, and you were there as well, and we connected.
Exactly. So you were speaking, you're probably one of these sought after speakers that everybody would like to have at their event, to give an inspirational keynote. And you did just that. You're very right. We met in Helsinki and you gave an excellent presentation, lots of food for thought. And then I came to talk to you afterwards, and we found out that we're both funds of the experience economy. And I told you I've interviewed Joe Pine and so on. And then we connected on LinkedIn, and you wrote the word transformative times and transformation. So tell us a little bit, because you often talk about change and transformation. What are the major struggles you feel are really bothering people, business people currently? Is there a top 10 or top 5 challenges that every CEO or management team or board is having in the back of the mind, or it depends really on the industry? From your experience, you're a consultant, you talk with a lot of people from various industries. So is there something that is on everybody's mind or lips, or where do you see this, the major changes happening?
First of all, one of my key things to talk about is when you talk about change and talk about transformation, I think the best approach to that is to be prepared. Because if you are prepared and you take actions on things and you have a sort of like a view on the world that is not just my existing business or my existing team, but trying to see what is really happening around in the surrounding world, to see where is our business going, then you can avoid the transformation, because transformations cost. They cost money, they cost people, they cost energy, they cost a lot of things, which is really sort of like, maybe not down the drain, but it's sort of like sunk cost. So if you can avoid doing the transformation, that is my best advice for people who are not just struggling for getting by every day. But if you can avoid do the transformation by seeing the surrounding world and take action. And that is also one of my key things to talk about with leaders. You need to have the courage to really see things as they are. Because if you can see them as they are, not like you want them to be, but as they are, then you can take action. But it takes a lot of courage to be able to do that. And it takes a lot of energy and preparations to be able to do that. And that is hard work. That is really hard work. So back to your question, is there any topics that is on everybody's lips right now? I think you can sum it up in one word, and that's insecurity. Mm-hmm. It's really hard to see for most businesses, for most industries, not all, but for most industries, to see what's really the key direction for the coming sort of like 12 to 18 months. It's easier to see what's coming in the next 10 years or 5 years. I think that is easier, but for the coming 6, 12, 18 months, it's really hard to grasp, and it's really hard to say, so sort of like the midterm plan, the short plan, what do we do next quarter? That is one thing. What do we do in 5 years? That is another thing. But in between that, sort of like the semi period, that time that is really not the exact moment now, but we need to take care of it. And I think many business leaders I talk to, they seems to have their long-term plan or their long-term vision sort of like sorted out, and the investments they need to do and the business logic or whatever they need to figure out. They have that sort of like, they can grasp that. But the midterm is really, really hard. And many people are struggling with that because of insecurity, because of sort of like the inflation, the wars going on in many parts of the world, distribution of wealth, environmentally or sustainability at all these sort of like juggling those kind of questions. And in the midterm, it's really hard to see left, right, should we adjust, what shall we do? So many leaders are struggling with that.
And how do you come in as an optimist and a change pilot? How do you facilitate and change their mindset to this short and midterm focus? And on top of that, my second question related, how can one say that you take their very realistic approach, or is it a very future-centric approach? And what is the connection between realism and optimism? Is it a continuum? Is it being an optimist is the self-fulfilling prophecy that you want to see the better short-term future unfolding before you have to believe it for it to happen and take the necessary action? Is this the core? Or how would you, someone would say, okay, I'm a realist. I don't want to be an optimist. We live in this hectic, stressful times with uncertainty, as you said. I want to face the realism. But indeed, as you said, there is a paradox, because on the one hand you have realism, and then you have very future far-fetched plans where the now is forgotten. So help us a little bit make sense of this paradox. Is it a paradox?
A little bit of both, I would say. It is a paradox in that you often, if you look at it from another perspective and say, this is our existing core, this is our existing, if you talk about a business, but the same reasoning goes for a society or for an individual or a family as well. If you have sort of like, if you can grasp what you have now, and if you have a backlog and history, specifically, if you're a corporation that has been successful and you have a legacy that you are bringing onwards and you want to optimize that, then you get into a complicated situation when insecurity really arises, and there's this juggling part when there's a couple of new questions that you haven't really you didn't need to take care of them before. Sustainability could be one, war, inflation, stuff like that. And wealth distribution is also one thing that really inflicts on many businesses, specifically consumer-centric businesses. And if you have that successful legacy with you, it's really hard to see we should go right or left, or we can do that. You can see that in the long term, but what do you do in between? And my advice for that, and my way of dealing with that, as your question were, is to one, get that sort of realistic view of what is really happening right now. And that's the realistic part. What is the sort of like, bring on the right glasses so you can see really sharp what is actually happening right now, from the outside in, not from the inside out, which is the usual perspective when you want to optimize something that has been successfully. You want to repeat that. But if you have that sharp, realistic view about what is now, then you need the optimistic view on seeing, okay, if we do these kinds of changes, if we put ourselves in a context, you need to contextualize both the narrow plan or the existing part, and you need to contextualize, okay, in that future, if that future works like that, what would our position be in that? And that's the optimistic view on that, because then you leave the sort of like your legacy behind and you scratch that apart and you say, in that world, what would be realistic for us to do to serve the customers that we have or that we want to have in that future? And then you can make sort of like it's called Star Trek design, it's called, to be able to look back from the outside in.
Remembering the future.
That's from the future looking back. And
right.
Then you have sort of like a track to follow. You get sort of like a slider to hold on to when you navigate your plan. And that is really, it's really useful to deal with that midterm plan, sort of like the 6 to 18 months or 24-month plan. If you have that approach that in that new world that is evolving, we're not sure really how fast or in what direction, but it's sort of like on that one. It's not like this, it's like
so that. So you are a change pilot in a futuristic aircraft that goes to the future, takes people with them, and then you fly back in time taking the actions. Is that what you do?
That's really what I do, because I've been there before and most people haven't. I haven't been in the future, just to be clear about that. I haven't been there. But I've worked with it so many times for sort of like 25 years. So I have the experience to see what are the things that really inflicts on our business, on our industry. And I can sort of like look that in. So, okay, if we add the meta trends or the mega trends of the world and see where that is heading, then I can see, okay, this is your industry will look sort of like this. I could paint that picture together with a management team or a leader. And then we can say, okay, in that world, we will take this position. That's our ambition. Okay, looking back, what do we need to do to connect the dots to be able to come to that conclusion and to come to that position? And in that way, the the analogy with the ChangePilot, my company name, is that of the pilot who takes his little boat from the harbor where he knows every stone and every cruise on that, and he goes out to this big super tanker, and he climbs up the ladder, and he stands sort of like half a step behind the captain and says, turn half a degree on that, slow down the ship, we shall do that, because he has been there before. And that's sort of my role as well in this.
Lots of questions that pop into my mind. So let me ask you, because you talked about how you work with leaders, with management teams, and take them on that journey, setting the ambition and then looking backwards. So I believe you organize workshops, right? It's a long process. I would like to ask you, how holistically you're working, because working with leaders in one industry, in a company X, Y, Z, you spoke about mega trends. How do you view the society at large and the trends and what's happening really in society, in the world, from a holistic point of view, going away from whether it's a retail business or telecommunications or education or whatever industry? What elements do you try to pull? Because I think also when I heard your keynote, you're a person who is, I think you mentioned it already, connecting the dots. And I do that myself. I'm a very curious person, and I think we can cross-fertilize and bring knowledge from different industries, from the arts even, right? So tell me a little bit about your approach. From where do you draw your inspiration? You've been doing it for 25 plus years. Where do you get the inspiration to talk to those leaders when you go to your sessions, your workshops, and really set the tone that, hey, let's open our brains here and our minds and look at this, what we're having at hand, so holistically?
Well, you mentioned the word that is really central in that, and that's curiosity. To be really curious about people, wanting to meet people and trying to understand. I'm always the guy who asks the stupid questions because I don't understand, and I like to understand. So I'm very curious in things and really love meeting people and talking about what's their driving forces, how do they foresee themselves, what are they lacking, and questions like that. I get my inspiration from a lot of meeting people, like I met you in Helsinki, and I'm constantly traveling, meeting people from various cultures and various positions in society. And if you should pinpoint that into one thing, I think the driving and the holistic approach as well comes from my interest in society, how society evolves. And everything that's sort of like you can see the trends and you can connect the dots if you are in society, not focusing too much on the businesses that you advise. So I spend a lot of time with sort of like going to cultural events, going to meetings with people, just looking around when I'm traveling. And then I have a big network that is sort of like global for people I've met, like you, met over the years. I've been doing this for plus 25 years and met a lot of people, and I stay connected with them. So I have talks with them, I have workshops with them, I get their papers, or I get their articles, and I read a lot, and I try to draw conclusions from that. And then when I work with leaders in either if that is in a specific workshop or it's for a long term, my advising periods is sort of like always a couple of years. And the leaders I work with, specifically the brave CEOs, they become friends. And like friends do, we tend to both care for them, and like we do with our children, but we also tend to say, how are you really true to yourself now? Is this really what you foresee for your company? Is this really how you want to lead your enterprise or NGO or society as well? And then it gets very personal. And to go back to the holistic approach about that, you need to see what is really happening in society, and there are methods for that. You can use a couple of methods for doing that, for drawing conclusions and trying to just connect the dots. And then you have to have your own ambition. So when I work specifically with CEOs of large corporations, I need to see, okay, forget the company vision or the company purpose. What is your vision? What is your purpose? Why do you, when you wake up in the morning, what really gets you going? and not just a slogan on the company building, but what really gets you going. Where's your emotional touch in this? And many leaders are sort of like unfamiliar to having that, and to be sort of like personally a personal stakeholder in what they do in the business life. So I try to bring personality to life inside corporations or inside organizations, and connecting people with that. So that is also sort of like part of the optimistic approach of helping people see themselves, sort of like mirror themselves. And I try to be that mirror for them and help them put that into words so they can articulate for themselves and then for others. This is where I come from. This is where I want to take this company. This is my approach to stuff. And then it gets personal.
And this is exactly what the show is about, Connections Unplugged. You mentioned the word connected, connection twice already in this last answer. And that has been my goal as well, because I think we have such a vast, and you spoke a lot about humans, people, connection. We do have collectively as humankind a lot of knowledge. And this is what I want to do with this podcast series, to bring out people like you who have a lots of ideas, who have experience, who are willing to share their insights, and they don't have this very inward, it's me, my little bubble, but they want to share. So they're curious people, they have things to say, they're passionate about. So I want to ask you, what is your personality? You talked about the personality of the leaders you've been talking with, advising, helping them, taking on that journey. And do you have, are you misunderstood as a person? Do you feel that perhaps your identity, who you truly are and how you're perceived, are those the same circles intersecting almost perfectly, or there is a gap in between? Or how your brand identity, as your personal brand, you've been very active for many decades now. So is it clear? I just want to find out, and the listeners and the viewers out there, who is Michael Johansson? What kind of personality? You said about curiosity. I can see you being a curious child, asking mommy, what is this? How about that? Or having the strong opinions. Tell me, am I right? Have you always been opinionated, passionate, and curious? Or how would you characterize your personality?
Well, I think you're sort of like spot on in that analysis there, because I always been, since I was a little kid, asking thousands of questions, and I think my parents were really tired about that. And I grew up quite a lot with my grandmother, and she was really patient. And she played cards with me, and we did crosswords together, and we sort of like went for walks, and I could say, what is that? What is that? What is that? And she tried to be really patient with me. And that has continued. I ask a lot of questions because I'm extremely curious, and I want to see how things connect, both business-wise and personal life. And in my personal life, one of my greatest interests is to cook food. Me and my wife, we cook a lot of food and host some dinners, and we grow sort of like most of the vegetables we eat as well, because we are curious to find out, how can we do this better? How can we improve this? How could we connect these sort of like ingredients? And what if we put it on fire instead of cooking it? And we're always experimenting with this. And that is also the sort of like one side of it. The other side is the more I would say sort of like introverted version of me as well, where I need to have peace and quiet, where I need to have some time for myself, where I can sit and just read a book, where I can just sit in silence and meditate, or I can just go for a long walk with my dog in the forest or by the sea, and just be with myself and not think anything else or to talk to anybody, just to be able to and find that connection. And that's also when the thousands of questions asked being analyzed in the back of my head needs some silence and needs to be that part. So the balance between the questionnaire and the analytic approach to everything, wanting to understand, and the peace of mind. So that's just two sides of the coin, and I think that really reflects who Michael is.
Michael, what legacy, you mentioned that word, and I was planning to ask you, so what legacy you would like to leave behind? You have many years to live still, but when you're gone, how do you want to be remembered from the people you had an impact on, you met, that crossroads with you, and had the opportunity to share a meal with you, or have a cup of coffee, or having this discussion? So how do you want to be remembered?
Um, I think that's two answers to that. I think one of them would be he really challenged my view on the world around me and myself. He really pushed me because I tend to push, trying to just enforce another view of oneself and the surrounding world. That's the one part. And the other part was he really helped me onwards in life, me, myself, and my company. We did get shit done because he practically, not just theoretically or plan wise, but he practically helped us get our asses moving in another direction, and that really helped us. So I think that would be sort of like my dream legacy. He asked a lot of questions. He pushed my thought. He changed my mindset. He helped me see myself and my company in another view. And he really forced us to change. He really got us going in another path.
Mm. You have provided a couple of interesting visuals. So let me just share this with our viewers. We spoke about knowledge and curiosity. What is the difference between a learner and a knower? And how do you see this?
I think this quote is really, I use it quite frequently to sort of like also change the mindset of that if you are curious enough to want to learn, then you also have to maybe not forget, but not be so certain, because the people who are, if we could characterize them as knowers, I know how this works, they will be left behind because the learners will eventually inherit the world, as Eric Hoffer so profoundly wrote in the beginning of the 17th. And I think that quote really also summarizes some of my thoughts about that you need to constantly learn, and not just theoretically learn, but practically. You have to train. Hands-on training. I call myself a practitioner, not a theorist or a futurist. I'm a practitioner. I work really, really hard with the people I work with. And I demand quite a lot of them as well. Because if you want to get something done, you need to sort of like roll up your sleeve and dig in. It's not just sitting and thinking. You need to be doing stuff. And I think that quote really emphasized that. You need to be willing to learn, and you need to bring that into your body, not just your mind, but into your body. And then sort of like, okay, let's get going. Then you really learn how to do the craft and how to do things in a new way. And that's really when I think the most of the value creation is either done or wasted. Because many people have the sort of like intellectual knowledge to know what we should do, but not the capacity to turn that into something hands-on that we do, and then you waste.
And perhaps there is where the synergy amongst people come, because maybe somebody, not everybody strikes the perfect balance between being an extrovert or an introvert, or a hands-on practitioner and a theorist. Maybe some people are better theorizing about things, and some people are better maybe executing, and some lucky ones like you, they're in the verge, in the between. That's where the magic happens. So I think, again, we go to this human centricity and connections, because again, I believe the concept of this show is to bring this shared knowledge, because if you think about it, we are now two people with 1 degree connection, with a direct connection to each other. We're having this talk now. This idea spark to each other's brains some some light bulbs are switching. And of course, the audience out there are second degree connections, are third degree connections. We live in this interconnected world that hopefully, I personally want to bring this synergy. I want people to reach out to you and become your first degree connections, and maybe create a project with you, invite you to their event, and so on. So let me ask you, would you be willing to share where people can find you? Would you accept people to follow you on LinkedIn, to connect with you? Are you, some people don't want to meet people that they haven't met personally. I see LinkedIn as a global conference, and sending a connection, I see it as a handshake. So I always accept people who want to connect with me. I'm very honored. So what is your approach? And tell us a little bit how people should connect with you and find you if they want to reach out to you and explore synergy and ideas and co-creation.
Well, I have that approach as well. My door is always open. So if you want to connect and come in for a cup of coffee and a chat, please do. Please do. If you want to connect with me on LinkedIn, just search me out and send an invite, and I'll accept it, and we'll take it from there. And I also always appreciate somebody having a thought, say, oh, I heard you, or I saw you, or I've heard about you, or something. Are you interested in this topic? Because
like we did here, right?
Like we did here. Because I think if somebody has an approach, not just a connection is a connection, but a connection is an open question or an interest or a common request that I want to share something. It's a two-way dialogue, not a monologue. And I think just like we're having a discussion now, and we had a really curious discussion when we first met in Helsinki, that opens up, and you want to connect again. And you see, okay, I got this question. I'll call Chris and see what's her view on that. And that's really where I think the most value, at least from my point of view, is to meeting new people. To see if there's something, do we have a common interest in something, in a question or in a topic or in an industry or a sort of like a personal way. It doesn't matter, as long as we are willing to have a dialogue, not just to oppose someone with my opinion, but to have an honest dialogue and say, never thought about that. That's interesting. Let's talk more.
Having a dialogue, that fits perfectly with my last question. I want to create a red thread that connects all my guests on the podcast. So I want you to pose a question right now to my next guest. So I will take your question and I will create this virtual dialogue. So please address Michael Johansson a question to my next guest. Anything you'd like to learn from this unknown person, what would you like now to ask them?
I would say, picture yourself a couple of years ahead from now. What do you see? What would be your legacy looking back 2 or 3 years as of the day we are today? What do you see that journey look like? What do you have accomplished? What do you want to be known for? Or the question that you asked me, what would you like your legacy to be? So picture yourself, not maybe 30 years from now, but 2-3 years from now, and say, what did that person look like? What has he or she accomplished over that period of time?
Great. Thank you, Michael Johansson. Greetings to Sweden. Thank you for appearing on Connections Unplugged. Please find Michael on LinkedIn, connect with him, check out his company, ChangePilots, and invite him, of course, to your events. He's an excellent public speaker. If you need an inspirational keynote, Michael is your guy. Thank you so much. Tack så mycket.
Tack så mycket.
And this was Connections Unplugged. Thank you for tuning in and listening. And I will see you next Wednesday with my new guest. And of course, we will take the question from Michael as well. Thank you for watching and bye.
Cheers.